So let's talk about getting to the root of the problem, okay? Because we all have problems, right? We encounter problems every day, every week, every month. But what is the root of those problems? Because the problem didn't just come out of nowhere. There is something in the problem that we are meant to learn because that is meant to teach us something in developing our character. See, we're constantly developing our character, okay? You need to see it like that. You are not supposed to be the same person you were 5, 10, 15 years ago. Okay, we're constantly evolving. Just like the world is constantly evolving and technology and generations, like our families are constantly evolving, so are we. So that's our purpose, to constantly evolve. And how do we do that? We have to develop our character, and we develop our character by learning from our problems, by learning from the things that bother us, right? So, what I want you to do is, I want you to think of a problem in your life, a problem that happened recently, a big problem, something that upset you, something that made you angry, something that kind of gave you like an outburst of emotion, okay? So, think of that problem and ask yourself, why did that bother me? Why did I react like that? The best question we can ask is why, okay? Why did that happen? Why am I upset? Why did this happen again? And as you keep asking yourself why, it's like every why you ask, you kind of get to like, you start to open up like an onion, right? You get to another layer. So as you think of a problem, and I want to do this with you guys so you can get an example, right? What happened recently? And then as you do it, also you start to get less mad. Like, I used to be a very angry person. I had depression, anxiety. I saw therapists. I was on medication, all these things. And it wasn't until I got to the root of the problem that I really saw change in my life. As I started to take accountability over my actions, my decisions, my thoughts, my feelings, because a lot of times it's kind of easy to blame someone else, right? Well, that person made me mad. Well, that person upset me. Well, that person did this to me. Well, my parents, my friends, my family, my relationship, like my boss, all these, all this finger pointing, when we have to take the accountability of like, why did I let that person upset me? Why was I so affected by their actions? Why? Why did I feel the need to say something? Why did I feel the need to react that way? And as we start to like ask why, we're able to kind of just really get to the root of our issues. So let me do this with you guys. Okay, last time I got angry. Ooh, okay. Um, okay. So last time I got angry, I had a health scare, like really bad. I've never had a health scare like that. Like, I was in the hospital. And I was upset because I felt like certain people that I wanted to be there for me were not there in the way that I wanted them to be there. Okay. So I was upset kind of at like people that I expected or wanted to show up didn't. Okay. And so I'm not gonna lie, when I got out the hospital, I let them know. I was like, hey, I'm upset. I felt like you could have done this, but you didn't. And, I let them know. And afterwards, I had to sit and think, like, why am I so upset? Why? Okay, they weren't there for me. But not everyone will always be there for you. And that's something that I've understood for a while now. Not everyone will show up the way you expect them to, because we cannot control anyone else. We cannot control people. And so then as I started to ask why, well, why did I expect them to show up? And then I asked myself, like, have I always showed up how people expected me to? And the answer is no, I haven't. Maybe maybe someone expected me to show up in a certain way, or show up in a better way or show up more, and I didn't. And maybe I disappointed them. So kind of like as I was upset at those people, I then turned around and reflected on myself. And I asked myself, like, have I always shown up in the way others have wanted me to? No, I haven't. And that's, you have to be honest with yourself. When you start to discover your emotions and you start to dig deep and ask yourself why, you have to be honest with yourself. That's so important. And that doesn't mean you have to like tell everybody what you did wrong and beat yourself up for it. Oh, I'm such a horrible person. What's wrong with me? No. You are honest with yourself, you acknowledge it, you accept it, and you move on. Okay. So once I realized that, I wasn't so upset anymore. I already told them how I felt. So then, next time I saw them, I was like, hey, like, we're good, and they felt bad because, then they reflected upon themselves and it was all good. It was all good. And I admitted that to them. I'm like, you know what? Like, maybe I was a little harsh. Like, there was times where maybe I lacked in showing up for you when you wanted me to. So it ended up becoming like a fresh start to like our relationship. And it was a fresh start for me seeing myself the way I've shown up. And it's also allowed me to start to show up in a better way. Like, start to think like, okay, if I want this person to show up for me this way, maybe I should do it too. So it started off as me upset at someone, and it ended up me looking at myself and how I can and how I can do better in my growth as a person. So now as I have more relationships or I meet more people, I'm able to, from the beginning, pay attention to how I'm showing up. If I say that I want friendships or relationships, close relationships, then I need to be able to show up in the same way I expect someone to. Okay? So you see how, like, that example, and this takes practice. This is not, uh, if you're not used to doing like inner work like this or really like self reflecting, it's going to take some practice and it's going to take time and consistency. And there was time where I didn't do this every day. I did this like once a week, once a month. As you start to become aware and you start to really like tune into your emotions and using your emotions to tell you what's going on in a deeper level. Remember, we're getting to the root. So now if someone doesn't show up for me how I expect them to, I'm not going to lash out. I'm just going to be like, okay, maybe they're busy like I've been busy. Maybe they didn't know. Maybe I didn't tell them how I felt. So maybe I should. We start to we start to have more understanding and we're not so rash with our reactions. Cuz that's what we want to have more control of. It's like our emotions. Like, we want to have more self-control, control over ourselves. Not pointing the finger, not lashing out, not getting upset, not getting angry, not getting disappointed, but just having more control over ourselves. And that's how that starts, by checking ourselves. Check yourself. Check in with yourself. How am I feeling today? Did something upset me? How am I feeling about this situation? So practice. If this video was helpful for you, I would appreciate if you would just like leave me a comment or ask me a question. And we'll see you next time. Bye.